All right, I think we're good. Yonah, welcome to Living Off Rentals.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So, if you're listening to this and you've heard about the tax benefits of owning real estate, it's important to understand that what we're going to talk about today is a big part of that equation. Why so much wealth has been built through real estate, just about more than anything else out there. And cost segregation and depreciation is what we're going to focus on today. It's a big part of that equation. It's not always the sexiest part of real estate investing. It's not the sexy before and after pictures, or the what you buy it for minus what you can sell it for. But behind the scenes, this is what can really add to that bottom line, and it's not really understood really well, and it's not talked about nearly as much as the purchase price minus what you sell it for and the profit margin there. So I'm excited to get into it with you today. If you can kind of share before we jump into it a little bit more about your background and how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Kirby, for having me. And I love your introduction because people talk about the tax benefits that come along with real estate, and no one really knows what all those tax benefits are, right? It's kind of one of those things, like everyone understands appreciation and, stuff like that, but the tax benefits are kind of a little clouded and a little mystique there. So I'm happy to get into that today with you. Background on me, I'm been in cost segregation for about 5 years, almost 6 years. Before that, I was a teacher for many years. Actually, I had a transition between teaching and real estate, doing some residential brokerage and then did some commercial mortgages, hard money loans, et cetera, like that. But my background is really in teaching and education. I started a nonprofit organization to help, families that were struggling with financial situations as well. So I'm really more about helping people. And my background has really been in for better or for worse, education. Having 6 kids myself, it's every day is educational experience, right?
Yeah, I have 2, and I don't know how you do that.
It's a challenge. It's certainly a challenge, especially when they grow up and have a couple teenagers. It's a challenge, but it's fun, and it really is. It's all about giving back. It's all about trying to focus on other people and trying to focus on how you can help someone else become a better version of themselves. And so that's really what my background is. Like I said, at a certain point, I decided I really needed some more income. I needed some more like wealth building tools. Teaching was not building any of that basically, and had depleted, savings and depleted, retirement, like nothing, what I mean? Having a growing family kind of did that, and had that light bulb moment at some point where I was like, okay, I need to do something. Real estate was for me just it was the most accessible thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I had some friends that were involved in real estate in various forms. And I realized I didn't really need to go back to school in any way, which I wasn't interested in. I didn't need any formal education to get involved in real estate. You don't. You just really need to educate yourself, find other people who are doing the same thing, learn from them. And it's a business, really. Every real estate is a business. So it's about learning business skills and things like that. And secondly, there's really the potential is endless. I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to real estate. If you have the right mindset and you have the right, make the right choices and find the right deals, you can make a boatload of money. Not that was what I was interested in, but I realized this was an opportunity that I could, not just getting some other job that would pay me a little bit more. This was something that really the sky was the limit. So that was my transition. I got into cost segregation.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you just quit teaching and jump right into it, or how was that transition? Because a lot of people are kind of going through that.
Absolutely, it was for me. It was a certain point. I was like, I still teach part-time, which I did continue doing for a little bit, probably the first year or so, as I was doing commercial mortgage brokering. And I realized, if I really want to focus on this and maximize it, I need to just put it on the side and hopefully maybe one day come back to it. But what I've found is that the passion is still there, and the ability to educate people in a different way and the ability to help people in a different way is still what I'm doing on a daily basis. So I basically use those skill sets and use that desire and that passion and put it into, a different ring, right? A different field, but that's still what I'm doing, I feel.
Got it. Okay. Nice. So then you got into real estate as a broker initially, did some lending as well. You said cost segregation was about, did you say 5 years ago? Is when you transitioned?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so How does one become a cost segregation expert?
You know, it's a magical thing. Just like cost segregation is magic, it really is. No, the truth is, I was reached out to by this company, Madison Commercial Real Estate. The one of the divisions is Madison Specs, the largest national cost segregation company. And I had, some introduction to the company, and they were looking for someone to work on the business development, to work on helping grow the company. And it was just a perfect fit for what I was looking to do anyways. I heard a lot of great things about the people there, and I was really open to an opportunity. And that really is basically the story of my life. Really is just following opportunities. When something's presented in front of you, just realizing, okay, now's the time to jump. Now's the time to take it and don't look back. And that's what I did. I didn't really know much about cost segregation beforehand, but what I found out was that neither did anyone else. Right? Meaning people out there in the general world. And what I mean is, I started reaching out to everyone that I knew in the real estate world, investors, brokers, you name it. And what I found was there were basically two camps of people. There were one that were very seasoned investors that knew exactly what it was and used it on their own properties. And there was another camp of people that knew nothing about it, never even heard of it. And guess what the larger camp was? It was the second one, obviously. And there was almost no middle ground. There were almost nobody that I saw was like, oh yeah, sure, I know what that is, but no, I don't use it. It's not something that we do. It was like, yes, of course, this is the best. We do this. I'm doing it for years, or I have no idea what that is. And so I found there's this huge gap of knowledge out there with literally probably 90% of the real estate investors that I spoke to. And I took it upon myself to learn as much as I could about this so that I could go ahead and just start telling everyone about this and getting them to know. And that was the reason why I saw a lot of people didn't know about it. Well, and we're not using the service because they just didn't know what it was. And even CPAs, which was surprising to me at the beginning, now it's no longer surprising. It's perplexing, but it's no longer surprising that CPAs don't even know about what this is, even though it's a tax, it's a tax tool. So how did I learn about it? From the experts, the real experts that work at Madison that are, been doing this for decades and are, very, very well versed in the field.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, if you could kind of explain what a cost segregation is for people who this might be in that, who might be in that second camp that you mentioned, that this might be the first time they're ever hearing about it. What are the basics of it, and how does it help somebody?
Sure. So cost segregation is really just depreciation. It's an advanced form of depreciation, right? Depreciation is a tax deduction that you get, an income tax deduction, when you buy a commercial or residential, any type of investment or business property. So not for your personal residence, but any other type of property you buy, the government gives you a tax write-off. Okay, you say, hey, we can now write off the entire value of this property, minus a little bit for land. Land doesn't depreciate, but whatever's on top of that does. And you can take this right away, right? You can take the whole, no, you can't take it all right away. It's not a huge write-off in the first year, but what you can do is split that up over a 39-year period or a 27.5-year period for residential properties. But that's a long time to wait. Meaning if you buy $1 million property and you divide that by 27.5, you get like $30,000 a year of deductions, right? Approximately, I'm rounding up. But that's great. What it does reduces your taxable income. However, with cost segregation, it's actually within the tax code. They've described certain assets in the property depreciate faster than just the building, just the structure, which really is the only thing that depreciates on that long schedule, that 27.5-year schedule. So to break it down, what it means, cost segregation, the word is, it's component depreciation. That's what it is. It's depreciating the individual components of the property in their own schedules, in their own lifespans. So certain things depreciate on 5-year or 7-year or 15-year schedules, which means you can take those tax deductions at a much faster rate. You can take larger tax deductions in the earlier years of ownership instead of, just taking a little bit each year. And so that's in a nutshell how cost segregation, what it is, and we can go into more detail and break it down how it works.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's super helpful. I've always learned best through case studies and examples. So can you kind of give I know every property is unique, but
sure.
Maybe there's more common types of properties that you come across, and maybe an example of one that you did recently that, this is how it all played out or worked out for the person, the investor.
Absolutely. So we can do this on any type of property. Like you said, every property is unique, right? Warehouses will have, less of personal property than, let's say, an industrial facility, a manufacturing facility, or a hotel, or a multifamily where you'll have more furniture and things like that. So let's take a simple example of a Airbnb, a short-term rental, right? That's something that I think a lot of people are interested in. And believe it or not, I get requested on a daily basis, probably like 10 people a day, like reaching out about short-term rentals, like Airbnb. It's crazy. And it used to be thought of that cost segregation was only for large commercial properties. And you have still nowadays, I find this on Bigger Pockets, I find it in forums and all kinds of places on Facebook groups, where people have found like this Journal of Accountancy article from like 2004, right? That says you can only do a cost segregation on a large building because it costs like $20,000, $30,000 to get it done. And so people are still using that as a proof that it doesn't make sense to do on a small property, even though really the cost is a fraction of the price. Meaning, to do short-term rentals, single-family, small residential properties is only a few $1,000s, maybe $3,000-$4,000. Not your typical, and even large commercial buildings don't cost that much nowadays either. So basically, the point I'm making is, this is practical for any type of property. Okay. So I'm going to give a really, really simple example. We do a lot of these short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, in the Gulf Shores of Alabama, like really vacation markets, right? So I'll take, let's take round numbers, $500,000 purchase price. Okay. $500,000 purchase price. We're going to take off 10% for land. Land doesn't depreciate. And that's the first thing you're going to do. So if you didn't do cost segregation, an interesting thing about short-term rentals is that it's on a 39-year schedule, similar to commercial properties, even though it's a residential property. It's considered a transient basis. And so therefore, even though single families should depreciate on a 27.5-year schedule, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, are going to be on a 39-year schedule. So now we're taking that $500,000, we're going to take off 10% for land. So we're left with how much? Let's say 500,000, we're at 450. Okay, $450,000. That's what's called your tax basis. If you didn't do cost segregation, what you would do is just divide that by 39. And what you'd be left with is approximately $12,000. Okay, I'm rounding, but I don't have a calculator in front of me, but it's around $12,000. What that means is you would take that off as a tax deduction from your income. So if on this Airbnb you grossed, let's say, $50,000, right, and probably even more, because I've heard the returns are crazy. Yeah. Let's say you netted $50,000. Keep it round, right? You netted $50,000. Well, immediately you can reduce that taxable income by $12,000, and so you're going to be only paying taxes on $38,000. That's depreciation. That's how it works. Okay. However, comes along cost segregation, and we send engineers to the property, either in person or virtually, and we're going to capture everything inside. So I mentioned there are things that depreciate faster. What are some of those things? Basically, anything that's non-structural will depreciate on a 5-year schedule, meaning you can take the value of all those individual components as a tax deduction over a 5-year period. So what are some of the things? Like shelving, furniture, appliances, even flooring, like vinyl flooring or carpeting, wall coverings, window treatments. So we're talking blinds, shades, all that kind of stuff, cabinets, countertops, anything that's non-structural, even decorative lighting and stuff like that. So there's a whole list, right, of all these different things that are inside that are non-structural that we can take the value, identify what the value of those things are, and then take those as a faster depreciation deduction. I'll get back to that in 1 second. There's another category that is called land improvements. That's anything outside that it's not really the land, but what's on top of the land. So for example, landscaping. If you have a patio or a deck, right? All of that is outside and it's considered 15-year property. It depreciates on a 15-year schedule. Concrete, pavement, you have a driveway or a parking lot or any type of sidewalk or any type of gazebo or fencing. All of that, the value of those components are going to depreciate on a 15-year schedule. So our engineers are going to come identify what all of those things are and all of the structural components like the doors, the windows, the roof, walls, foundation, all that stuff. And add it all up.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
Real quick. I just had a clarifying question. Is the value of those items based on the purchase price, or is it based on the market value?
So it's based on the purchase price. Right. Okay. That's an excellent question. So your depreciation basis, the amount that you can take as a tax write-off, is totally based on the purchase price. Now, what we do is we're going to identify the actual components and how much of that is, and then reverse engineer, right, based on the market value or based on the industry standards of the value of those components themselves, right? So shelving may cost, I don't know, $300 a square foot or something like that, right? But so now you have 30 square feet, we're going to add that up, and then we're going to make calculations based on the real useful life of that, as well as the tax useful life, as well as sometimes there's a premium rate or a discount rate, depending on how much you actually paid for the property. All those crazy calculations aside, what we're going to need to know is how much of this $500,000 property is in, how much of that actually gets allocated to this 5-year property, to the things that depreciate in a 5-year schedule. So let's keep it really simple, right? We said we're left with $450,000 basis. Let's say 20% of that goes into your what we call a 5-year property. And that's pretty average case study, especially for short-term rentals, because you own a lot of the furniture and all that stuff. So 20% of 450,000 is $90,000. Okay. So $90,000. And then we're going to take another 10% of the 15-year, right? The land improvements. So that's going to be another $45,000. So altogether, we're going to get $135,000 of what's called accelerated depreciation. That means those amounts we can now take at a faster depreciation rate. Instead of, remember, $12,000 of standard straight line depreciation every year, we're now going to be able to front load $135,000, so 30% really of the property into those faster lives. Now, but it gets better, because there's something called 100% bonus depreciation, which allows you, it's a new tax law. It's actually being phased out. This year is the last year to take advantage of it. But essentially what it says is once you've done a cost segregation study and identify what those faster depreciation schedules are, you can now take those accelerated amounts in the first year. So literally, you can take a $135,000 tax deduction in the first year of ownership. And that's just crazy. I mean, literally from 12,000 to 135,000. Okay. But now the great question a lot of people will ask is, and I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off from asking any questions, but just kind of preempting them.
It's great.
is well, what happens if you're taking all that up front? What happens in the second year, right? What are we left with? So really, you're still left with the structural components, that remaining 70% that we're going to take as a tax write-off. So instead of your $12,000 deduction each year, it's going to go down to about $9,000, right? That's what your depreciation deduction is going to be going forward. But what can you do with that $135,000 bonus depreciation? That's what everyone wants to know. That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
This is the main reason why this cost segregation is such a powerful tax strategy. Because for normally speaking, and I'm going to tell you what the standard is before I get to the incredible thing about bonus depreciation and short-term rentals specifically. Normally speaking, rental properties are considered passive income from the IRS, even though it's not passive, right? We spend a lot of time in it, but if you have rental properties, they're going to be considered passive income. Passive income is treated on your Schedule E on your tax return and is actually treated differently than your W-2 income or any other source of income that you have, which means that it's taxed differently. And your depreciation deduction that we spoke about is going to be used solely to offset that Schedule E, that rental income. So if you have a bunch of properties, let's say you have 10 properties, all of the income is going to be lumped together in that Schedule E, and all of your depreciation is going to be lumped together as well and be able to offset all of your income from all your properties together, which is why cost segregation can be great. You can do it on one property and offset the income from all of your properties, right? However, if you're not a real estate professional, meaning you own a rental property, you invest in something, which a lot of people are doing, you're going to be limited to taking that depreciation to offset any other income besides for your rental income, besides for your passive income. What that means is what was our example? You made $50,000 from this Airbnb, right? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? That $135,000 cost segregation deduction is going to go against that and is going to wipe out your tax liability. You're going to pay zero taxes on that $50,000 of income right now. Okay. But you had $135,000 deduction. What happens to the rest of that money, right? Where does that go? So what that does, it reduces, right, your $50,000, and you're left over with how much? $85,000 of what's called a passive loss. Those extra deductions, usually will just carry forward, meaning if you're not a real estate professional, you can't use those $85,000 against any other source of income, against your W-2 or against anything else. It's going to be just suspended, and it's going to be sitting there on your Schedule E as a negative balance, right? A negative loss. You're not going to pay any taxes on that income, but you're going to use that next year. You can use it in the future. Those passive losses, what's
So
called
when you make
carries forward.
50,000 next year, you'd wipe it off again and still have
Exactly.
35,000. Okay. Got it.
Exactly. So that's exactly what happens. However, there's one loophole with considering, and as I mentioned, being a real estate professional actually allows you or your spouse, if any one of you is a real estate professional, you're able to use those extra losses against your W-2 or against any other income you have. However, most people aren't, and most people are going to be stuck with those passive losses. This is where short-term rental comes in. Short-term rentals have a loophole that says if you are, number one, the property average stay is less than 7 days, which most Airbnbs, most short-term rentals are, and you are spending enough time materially participating, meaning self-managing your property by spending either 100 hours on the property a year and more time than anyone else, right? So you're doing all the self-managing, or 500 hours a year, meaning there's two qualifications. There's actually more, but these are the two most common. So once you have that established that you're spending all this time, guess what? Those extra losses can now be released and used against your W-2 income as well. It actually makes those losses active, which is why I'm seeing so many people who are doctors, lawyers, IT professionals, people who are in services and making a lot of money, high W-2s, have no way to offset that with real estate. Okay, it's offsetting your rental income. They want to try to figure out a way, how can I offset my W-2 income? The only way that I know of, one of the only ways I know of, I should say, is with short-term rentals and materially participating. This is probably the most powerful loophole that I know of.
Interesting. Wow. So just to play off that same example then, so somebody is working a W-2 job and they're making $85,000 a year. They go and buy a $500,000 property, like you mentioned, makes $50,000 extra a year. So they're bringing in now an extra $50,000 on top of their 85.
Right.
They do this cost segregation. And in the first year, they make $135,000 of depreciation. And so they can offset that $50,000 plus their $85,000 and pay $0 in income taxes their first year.
That's exactly right.
And so then the next year, they could potentially do the exact same thing and do a cost segregation, buy another property for $500,000, do cost segregation, do it over and over again.
Exactly. And as one of my clients mentioned to me today, he's getting the tax deductions from one property, having enough of that income from one property to literally put a down payment on the second one. So meaning by not paying taxes, right? Think about all the money they saved on that. I mean, you could literally, if you $85,000, have $100,000, even if you're a 22% tax rate, you're saving, right, $20,000, $30,000 in taxes, right? That's enough, literally, if you're putting, depending on what type of loan you're getting, et cetera, but you can get a 10, 15% down loan on these vacation rentals. You can buy another $300,000, $400,000 property just from the taxes that you saved, and literally doing the same thing again the next year and just keep the ball rolling.
Got it. Wow. So God bless people that are buying cabins for $750,000 in Gatlinburg. I'm a big advocate for more affordable vacation rentals. That's what my portfolio is made up of. I buy mostly in Michigan City, Indiana, which is, a very affordable area right near Lake Michigan. So there's still draws there, right. and they perform really well from a short-term rental standpoint, but the price point is very low. So if you have a portfolio of properties, does it still make sense if they're low-cost properties? Can you do this across a whole portfolio, or does it work differently since it's multiple properties?
It does work differently on multiple properties, meaning you're going to have to do a cost segregation on every individual property. And so therefore the cost basis and the cost of getting the study done will be, one per property, which makes it less beneficial, albeit still can be beneficial there, right? You're not going to lose out. However, if you do a like a portfolio, let's say buy a bunch of properties together, and you're going to depreciate them together, that's the only time where you can depreciate them all together and just do one cost segregation on one. For example, I had a guy a couple of weeks ago bought like 20 houses on one street, literally bought like one street, like a cul-de-sac. and we're doing one consolidation on that one
Okay.
portfolio, because it's really like multifamily in a way. They're all like the same build, all the same thing, right? So
It was all on
bought
one
together.
closing statement.
All in one closing statement,
Got it.
all from the same seller, all in one loan, and so they're depreciating them all together as a portfolio. So that's an example where you could do it together. But our example, we gave a $500,000. You see how pronounced that can be in terms of the tax savings. So I mean, even if it's half that amount, right? If you have a $250,000 purchase price, right? I don't know how much these properties are in Lake Michigan, but I don't know if it's less than that, but
it's anywhere. I mean, all of them are mostly Burr properties, so I'm buying them pretty cheap, putting in a rehab. So they're anywhere from 100,000 all in to 250 all in, depending on the property. So it's still, it sounds like it still could make sense. So is 20% about where it typically shakes out when you're for the bonus depreciation up front?
Yeah, it's usually especially with short-term rentals, between 20 and 30%. So I'd say on average 25%. We've definitely seen some with a little more. I gave that example of 30% just to kind of show you the how high it can be, and it certainly can be with certain properties. But I'd say somewhere in that range.
Okay, got it. And now, so somebody does this, they've got this depreciation built up, kind of front loaded in the beginning. And then 5 years later, the property is appreciated quite a bit, and they want to sell the property. How does the IRS treat the depreciation at that point?
So the depreciation at that point is going to be, we have something that's called depreciation recapture tax. Okay. So this is one of the downsides to doing cost segregation, because anytime you sell a property, you're going to be subject to both capital gain tax if you made a profit on the sale, and everyone is familiar with that. But there's also another tax, which is also a capital gain, which is considered an unrealized gain, and it's called depreciation recapture tax. Okay. Which means you're subject to a tax on the amount of depreciation that you took during the life of ownership. So if you took more depreciation up front, that means you're just going to be subject to a higher tax on the sale. It doesn't mean what, I'll just put this out there because I've heard this wrongly stated many times, that you are recapturing your depreciation, which means you have to pay it all back, which is not true. You do not pay back the depreciation, but you are taxed on the amount that you took. So if you took, and it could be, there are actually 3 different rates of that depreciation recapture tax, but it's usually, there's a 25% rate, and then there's a ordinary income rate, and sometimes it can be a little more, a little less. But on average, it's going to be much less, or significantly less than what your ordinary income tax rate would be if you just paid the tax during the year. So you're always going to have a benefit of doing the cost segregation, because you have the time value of money, because you have that money that you can use now, reinvest that now, instead of just paying taxes and then not having any money to use to reinvest.
I see. Got it. Yeah, I definitely had heard the depreciation recapture as well, and was thinking that that was what you were responsible for, is that whole amount. So it's just a tax on that amount. What if you do a 1031 exchange at that point and buy something that's like kind, and move your capital into a new property? Do you still have a tax on your depreciation?
So no, the great thing about 1031 exchange is not only does it defer your capital gain tax, but also defers that recapture tax as well.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So do you, I'm curious, do you personally invest in real estate, and are you targeting any specific types of properties? Like, what do you personally feel is the best thing to target right now, the best type of investment?
It's really hard to know what the best thing is. The great thing, I have kind of like a bird's eye view on real estate, because we have thousands of clients, and I literally see across the country, in every market possible, every type of asset class, and people are doing deals, and every single person will tell you that their asset class that they're focused on is the best type of investment there is, right? Yeah. So it's hard when you have self-storage. People are saying self-storage is the best. Mobile home parks it's the best. Multifamily is the best, right? Everything's the best. Yeah. So for me, what I've gained from that is, well, okay, so I'll diversify, right? I'll try to invest in as many things as I can and see what actually happens. And the truth of the matter is, they're all the best. All real estate, if you have people that are operating it, they feel it's the best, and they are doing it. So I've partnered up with others. I don't personally do any active investing. myself, but I have partnered up with others doing some passive investing on both multifamily and self-storage properties, as well as I have been targeting trying to find a short-term rental for this very reason that we've discussed. And it's something that I've actively been looking at a few markets and just trying to find something, trying to find the best property out there.
Nice. I've got a program that walks people through how to get their first vacation rental, so we can talk about that afterwards. But
okay.
So you mentioned that you're passively investing in other people's deals. So you receive a big benefit when they do, as a passive investor, when they do a cost segregation study, right? And they take bonus depreciation. So can you explain the benefit that passive investor, because I think a lot of the audience, they're putting deals together. Mm-hmm. They're what's known as a general partner in a deal. They're the main investor in that deal. And then they go out to other investors to help raise the money for the equity that they need, separate from what the bank is providing. So that's right. There's a big benefit around cost segregation for these passive investors. Can you explain that?
Sure. Just like we mentioned before with the short-term rental, every type of property is going to have the depreciation. And depending on who owns the property, every investor, depending on their percentage of ownership, that they're taking an equity portion, they're taking an investment percentage in that property, are going to get that percentage of depreciation allocated back to them. So if you do, and we can just multiply this by 10, like a multifamily property for $5 million, right? And you're getting a $1.3 million tax deduction in the first year. So that's going to be distributed to the investors according to their percentage of ownership. The reason why this is so beneficial for a lot of people is because, like we mentioned, the depreciation is going to be used to offset your passive income, any investment income you have. However, if you're a W-2, right, you're not going to be able to use that. So it is beneficial within the parameters of your investment properties. If you invest in multiple deals or even in one, at least the income that you're earning from that deal is not going to be taxed. And usually within the first 5 years, if you do a cost segregation, you're not going to have any taxable income in many, many cases, which means all of those returns are going to be tax-free, which there's almost no other investment vehicle that I know that you can get returns like that during the life of ownership of an investment. There's some alternative investments like equipment investing and some oil and gas and things like that. But, traditional stock market or things like that, it's impossible. So that's why it's going to be most beneficial for passive investors.
Got it. Yeah. That's a huge selling point. I think that people overlook when they're, pitching private investors on their deals. Mm-hmm. Is, it's a lot of times it's high net worth earners that have, money that they're putting into these deals, and they already have a big tax liability. They're doing this because they want to invest without more of a tax liability. So they're getting paid back, through the cash flow of these deals. But then at the end of the year, they get the income statement or the K2 or K1 that shows what they made on the property, and it shows that they didn't really make anything because they can front load that depreciation. So that's pretty cool. So I'm curious if somebody wants to get this done. Like, do they have to own the property in the first year, or if they've bought properties, they've been investing in rentals, they've never heard of this before, can they just do a cost segregation on property they've owned for a while?
Yeah, that's the greatest thing about this is that you do not need to do cost segregation in the first year of ownership. It's something that can be done really at any point, and it's a tax strategy that, use it when it's best for you. So it may not be beneficial to get it done in the first year, although most people try to get it done in the first year so they just have their, taxes set up right from the very beginning. Although if you've owned a property for many years and never did this, you can go back and actually catch up the amount of depreciation that you could have taken previously and get like a lump sum this year by doing what we call like a look back study. And you don't need to amend your previous year's tax returns to do that. You just basically catch up and change your depreciation method going forward. So that's a huge benefit.
Awesome. Yeah. I realize I made some mistakes around this in the past on properties that I could have done this on, and I didn't take advantage of it. Some that I've sold since, and it would have been really smart to do. So if somebody does want to work with you, you assist with this process. What does that look like? How does that, how much does it cost? What's the time frame for it? When do you recommend they start? That sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people like to reach out when they have a property under contract or right when they buy a property, so they get to start the process early. And we always run a free feasibility analysis, so we'll do an estimate of any property of what it will cost and also what the tax benefits will be. We have a flat standard fee based on the square footage and size of the property. It's pretty, like I mentioned before, it's not $20,000-$30,000, more like $3,000-$5,000, depending on the size of the property. And so it's something that's extremely beneficial. I mean, even that fee itself is a tax write-off, right? It's a business expense. So essentially, it's basically free money, right? The thing I would say is, reach out if you do want to get that analysis. We work in all 50 states, so it's something that can be done at any time. We have transitioned because of COVID a couple of years ago. We instead of doing on-site site visits with our engineers, we have a whole team of engineers. Instead of sending them to every property for many types of properties, we transitioned to doing virtual site tours, which means we'll employ, a video call with someone and our engineer on the other end. We'll just record that call, do a walkthrough of the property. Now, again, not every type of property can do that. We can't ask someone who owns like a shopping mall to walk like 4 hours, like through, through the thing, but we'll send our engineers out for that. But for single families and for multifamilies and smaller properties, we're able to capture a lot, especially multifamilies where from a tax perspective, you only need to go into one of each unit type. So you don't actually need to go into every single unit to do the cost segregation. You can go to one of each unit type or layout, and then use that to apply to the rest. And then any common areas that you might have. And so that's extremely beneficial. It usually takes us about 6 to 8 weeks to complete the whole thing from beginning to end. And then what it does produces this like 80, 90 page report, very thorough, audit proof, totally aligned with the audit techniques guide. And then that gives you a new depreciation schedule. And that is what you're going to hand off to your accountants, and you'll know how to deduct your taxes.
Nice. Sounds pretty straightforward. So if somebody wants to get that feasibility study or just reach out for more questions, what's the best way to contact you?
I mean, you can find me on all the socials. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can also go to yonahweiss.com, which is my website, or our company, madisonspecs.com.
Nice. And you have a kind of a newer podcast, right?
Relatively. I mean, we've been doing it for close to 2 years now, so it is relatively new. But yeah, Weiss Advice. Go over and check that out if you want to learn from successful real estate investors.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Yonah, thank you very much for taking the time today. This has been really enlightening, and I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to change the course of what they were doing as a result of the information that you shared. So really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.